There we go. I just wanted to say that the library, Friends of the Library funded $20 gift cards and not $50 gift cards. It's just a small little tweak, but it's just something that I noted.
That's a good catch. Now we are at 6, Rick arriving. We're waiting for Chris Bangs, our council liaison. So the one correction. So for that kind of a correction, do we need to go through motions and everything? I mean.
Move to pass it as amended.
Okay, so do I have a motion to pass it as amended?
I move to pass it as amended.
Thank you, Lois. Second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Luke. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, unanimous. Rick, did you say, I missed, did you say, okay,
Anonymous.
thank you. Okay. All right. Public comment. Well, seeing no public, and are we doing Zoom also? So speak now, or you're kind of out of luck. Nobody. Okay, thank you, Danny. Okay, so we will hold on the council liaison report because he's not here yet. Move on to board chair. So what I'd like to report was city staff has received 2 applicants for board opening. One lives in the city and one lives out. Maya reported to me a revised council modification or amendment from October 2021 that talks about members living outside and inside the city. And what we need is an inside the city person. So Maya and I have talked to the people involved, and I think we've got a consensus that we will interview just the person from inside the city for this time, and hopefully instruct the other applicant to watch for the next opening. Other than that, let's see, Danny sent out the Oregon revised, let's see, not revised statutes, but the, I got to get this, OAR, administrative rules. So I hope everybody had a chance to visit that and just skim over the portion that applies to a library of our size, because it's partially based on population and how many we serve. So, and anytime, Joe, you have a comment to intersperse and advise, please let me know. Okay. So that's kind of it. It's been a lot of paperwork for the past week and juggling around phone and emails to do things. So board members, anybody have a report they want to do at this time? Quiet.
So the Friends had their monthly board meeting, but it was during spring break week and attendance was very poor. So there really wasn't anything to report from the Friends of the library.
Thank you, Lois. And Denise, any word from LDAC?
LDAC is still waiting to set a date. Again, they said it was probably sometime May, but I'm assuming June would probably be more what we would hear. So nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Onward. Luke.
Well, we are still going with our library card drive. That's going to run till the end of April. And thanks to the library staff, they did like an Earth Day event here at the library, and for teens to pick up free books and like a reusable straw. And in those are some applications for a teen library advisory council. So that's going to hopefully get up and running sometime soon. Danny, you might have more information about that. I'm not sure if it really matters one way or the other, but hopefully that'll also be able to provide more information for the board.
Excellent. Thank you.
You did great, but I don't have anything else.
Okay, onward. And we've already done Friends of the Library. Discussion items are the board members were instructed to meet and review state, city, and all applicable powers, duties, and laws and so forth. Unfortunately, when that was scheduled, tax season was not taken into account. And for some of us, we just got ours in by the skin of our teeth. So what I want from board members present, because there were several members who volunteered to work on a subcommittee on that. And this is, Joe, I may need your advice on this. A subcommittee of less than a quorum can meet and work and then come back and inform the entire board and then take action depending on that.
So the whole board taking action on it? Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
That's what you're, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a subcommittee by being a subcommittee, isn't a quorum.
Okay. So my question is, because it didn't make it into the minutes, the names of who volunteered and who wanted to be interested or who was interested. And I know that because of jobs, I know Jessica was one and she doesn't even get off until she barely makes it at 5:30. So Rick, were you one?
Anytime, any day, any hour.
Okay. Yeah. I'm after 10 a.m. Okay, Denise, you were one also, and
I would love to fit in wherever I could. Things are getting really thick at work,
Mhm.
so I think that I'm gonna have to bow out. I think too many things.
okay, so you would still, be part of the board, so that'll come up
Absolutely.
for discussion then. Okay, Susie, did you?
No, not to be on the subcommittee.
Okay,
no.
that's what I thought. Lois, did you?
So. okay, presence.
Like me there. I didn't make any comments on this at the last meeting, and I did not offer to be on the subcommittee because I wanted a chance to think of that. And I am going to take this opportunity to express my thoughts, and I'm going to make 3 points and then draw my conclusion. So for those of you who don't know me, my background was as an HR executive, and I had lots of experience working with counsel on a daily basis. Our own general counsel, plaintiffs' counsels, ERISA attorneys, you name it. I dealt with them on a regular basis. I knew my area of authority and that of the external counsels and my general counsel. And I also knew when to hand things over to the various counsels versus things that were under my authority. And I knew when to assert my authority. So that's kind of my background. And then I went back and reread a lot of this stuff. And I did actually read all the material that was given to me at the time I joined the board. And so the library board was established by and is governed by the Canby City Council. Basically, the library board, as I understand it, reports to the city council at the discretion of the city council in an advisory capacity and not a legal capacity. That's his job. That's not our job.
Mhm.
The library director is a city employee. He reports directly to the city manager, and he's obliged to follow the city rules or he would be insubordinate and we'd have to fire him, which would not be good. Because in the state of Oregon, if you're fired for insubordination, you do not get unemployment insurance. The state takes the mantle of authority very, very, very seriously. So my conclusion is that I do not believe the interpretation of these laws is within the scope of our powers and duties, as which I went back and reread several times, nor is it within the scope of the library director's job responsibilities. This is a legal issue and should be addressed by the city attorney and the city manager. That's truly what I believe. We are authorized by the city council. We're not authorized to investigate this. Special investigations, yes, can be done if we're asked by the city council, but we have not been asked to do this. And my conclusion is we follow the city rules. And if we want to note to the city attorney and the city manager that there seems to be some misalignments, not even going to call them discrepancies, I'm going to call them misalignments between the city rules, the county rules, and the state rules. That's, I think, something that we should hand over and say, please note this, not even a complaint, it's just a, please note this and advise us on how we should handle this. I mean, really and truly, Joe, that's your job, is how I feel about this. And we focus our time and attention on the list of current powers and duties. I mean, I just within a 10-minute walk from my house, I see 3 new neighborhoods being built. Further down the road, there's 3 or 4 new neighborhoods being built. And that's just on this side of 99. Canby has a lot of growth coming, a lot of things coming up. And quite frankly, I see that we have a lot to do and, you know, quibbling about legal interpretations. I'm sorry, but that's what attorneys do. That's what they're paid to do. That's what they went to school for many years to learn how to do. That is not, I don't see how that is within the realm of our power, of the powers and duties of the Library Advisory Board. So I really actually object to the idea of spending time on this. So.
Got that all down, Susie?
I
think
really
so.
like that interpretation because I do feel we have been spinning our wheels doing things other than boosting the library and the needs of the people. And that's exactly what I signed on for, was to try to make sure the library was meeting the needs. And by getting bogged down with that kind of detail, we're not being effective.
Would either of you like to make a motion to erase that subject from our list?
So I make a motion that we note that there is there appears to be some discrepancies between the city rules regarding libraries, the county rules, and the state rules. And we note that to the city attorney and the city manager. And we ask for any advice they would have to give us. But in the meantime, we follow the city guidelines. I think that's really, truly how I feel. We should follow the city guidelines until such a time as the legal experts tell us differently. I don't know how, that's not a very good, that's not a very good motion. I apologize for that. But that's
good.
Denise seconds that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Okay,
agree.
any further discussion? Any comments?
I just have one comment. I think there is somewhat of an unwritten responsibility to comment, discuss, advise, take input from the general public on anything in city code that is either contradictory, obsolete, it conflicts with our overall duties that we want to perform. As an example, secretary position, that came out of left field, way out of left field. And arbitrary changes by city council is really not appreciated by me. So my thought is that I agree most of what Lois has proposed, but I think we still have an obligation to comment when we see some kind of conflict or something that is impeding our progress. So that's where I'm
Okay.
coming from. You leave the door open.
And I actually agree with you, Rick. I do think that it is that while we are an advisory board, we also do serve. And I think it shows that in our powers and duties, which I reread, that we also do have a bit of an audit function as well. And the two have to kind of go hand in hand. Yeah, it's kind of like advising, auditing. There's a little bit of tension there. But I am not suggesting that we abandon the audit. I just think that we're getting into serious legal interpretations, and that's where I don't want to go. I don't want to cross that line.
Okay. I would just like to say that I agree with what you said about the being blindsided. And I'll say a little bit more on that. I don't know if I haven't heard from him, so I don't know if he plans to attend tonight. But he had raised and I'm going to change the order of discussion on the agenda to his comment or his, and I hope that the agenda and the minutes from the meeting last month clearly summarized what was discussed at the last council meeting pertaining to the library and library liaison. Because as I understood it, the idea was that the board chair would give a monthly report to the city council. There wasn't any time for that report specified, whether it was a 3-minute or 5-minute or what. And the other part of that was that then the county liaison would only meet with a board once a year. So what it caused me to do was say, well, what's the meaning of liaison? What are the implications of a liaison to a board? And I just have to find the right page. So if any of you looked it up, it's in the Oxford Dictionary. And it is in tiny words, person works closely between two entities. There is an implication there that once a year is kind of skating off into something else. And of course, the bottom line is, this is my second term as chair. And certainly the secretarial thing last fall, which we heard nothing about. There was no discussion with the board. The board was entirely left out of that. The impact, and I don't use the word impact hardly ever, the effects on the board were really to swing us off track and have us focused on who are we going to have, who could I convince to become the secretary, and then figure out what all the duties were and the order of the duties, when do you do them, who do you send stuff to, all that. So it was a real time waster for the board because nothing was lined out in advance and we weren't involved, which is why I agree with what Rick said, that being blindsided is not pleasant. So, and I just had the misfortune of being chair at the time. So the word liaise is to work closely with somebody and exchange information with them. So that's the verb. The word liaison, so as a council liaison, is a relationship between organizations or different departments in an organization involving the exchange of information or ideas, and between A and B, for example, or with someone. We, in the city, for example, work closely, in close liaison with the police, for example, or other departments. So that was what I had understood that word to mean. My background is also HRM, and it is also languages, foreign and English, both. And so words are important. So, and I'm kind of going to dominate this particular thing because I agree with what was said at the last meeting by Denise. A liaison from the council who meets with the board, gets to know the board members, has a relationship so that council person is approachable by board members. And they know who that person is, and vice versa. It swings both ways. So it is definitely a relationship of trust and consideration. And that's why the blind sides have been so rugged. To not be involved in decision makings that directly affect the board is really questionable.
Yeah, it actually had me thinking twice about serving on the board when you get enough information that blindsides you and you're working on a bunch of other things and this thing comes out of left field. You're not prepared for it and you really wonder where you're effective if what you thought you were focusing on as a group has now been kind of moved to a whole different way of thinking, and that your practices have to change. And it really kind of got to the foundation. The changes were touching the foundation, which has been really toyed with ever since, I'd say, the last 2 years. And I blame COVID for a lot of that, but
Yes.
it's led to a fragmenting, and this just further fragmented. And having that constantly happen doesn't make you effective. I think that's like my main thing, is the effectiveness of the group
Yes.
is really diluted.
And I confess, it certainly led me toward looking, well, what are the rules that apply to us? How are we supposed to behave? Because what I've noticed is the biggest difference in the absolute dearth of timely communication. The email that Maya sent me with the October changes to the code. The trouble is, there's a handbook with one set of numbers for the board, and then there's the city code with another set, and they pertain to the same thing. So the question though is, okay, I received this April 13th. And it says, which we will be getting updated. This is requirements from the code, amended in October 2021. My expectation of a liaison is that things that are going to be amended affecting the board would be discussed, that the liaison in a timely fashion before the decisions are made or votes. And certainly before, more in advance than the day before the last vote. It was like, oh, okay. Now, my big question is for everyone involved, since we are all volunteer taxpayers in the district and a goodly portion in the city too, is what is going on that the communication, I mean, it isn't that hard to send an email. It's very quick to send out. We're going to be discussing this. You might want to be at the council meeting. We would like to meet with you and talk to you about this, because I still don't understand what the purpose. The state has a statute that says it's a really simple sentence. So what is the purpose of that simple sentence? I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle than the legal angle. I'm looking at it from the practice, the application of this, changing to that, and what it said to not involve any board members in discussion or even advance notice. Nothing from anybody, not one single peep. That in the HRM, I was at George Fox, that was very strongly that you want to build trust between different departments and a functioning entity. And you want to have respect. You want to communicate timely with other people so that kindness, consideration, respect are up here in all your activities, because what you're doing, this is a community. Canby is a community. And we're also involved in the larger district. So my questions are, what's going on here? Why is this major change in attitude? Because this is my second term on the board. And my first term on the board, we worked really closely with city staff, library staff, and council. And what happened? What did I miss? So anyway, those are my questions pertaining to this?
Chair Myron, can I try to address maybe the question you have?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks for, I guess, entertaining me, having me here today. Thanks for your service. So I've been looking at one of the central questions that I keep hearing, right, is how the change in the secretary came about and whether or not there's a conflict of laws. And it seems to be on its face, right, when you have ORS 357, 490, or no, 465, does call for when a library is created and established under that particular code, that those are the clear, pretty distinct setups where how many members you can have, how many can be in and out of district, and then who the secretary is, which is the librarian.
Mhm.
I guess, first of all, I guess I could talk about process, which is I believe that the board, this was my belief, is that the board was the one wanting the change of the ordinance as it pertained to the voting member, the high school voting member. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
so I believe when that came about, somehow the question of whether or not, because none of our other boards have a staff member as a secretary, I believe the idea of why don't we make it in parity with all the other boards was somehow decided, and I don't know exactly where that came from, frankly, but I'm just telling you what I know.
Mhm.
And so as it came to me, I frankly didn't realize this statute named a librarian as the secretary.
Mhm.
And so I didn't, I guess, do my due diligence to know. It seems pretty obscure, although it seems pretty straightforward, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think what happens is whenever we change an ordinance,
Mhm.
sometimes we'll look at an ordinance and go, what else could we change? Because every time we do it, we have to go to the publisher and then they
Mhm.
publish it out and put it online and
Mhm.
everything. So I don't believe it was supposed to be something that was meaning of disrespect or to pull anything out from under anybody. I think people somehow thought it was going to be putting it on balance with all of our other committees who don't have a staff member as a secretary. They all have their own secretaries.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? So I think it was a lay person's version of trying to create parity across boards. And
Mhm.
my eyes didn't, I guess, know about this particular statute in order to say, wait, no, that's one particular board that can always has to be constructed this way.
Mhm.
What I can say too is when you talk about conflicts of laws,
Mhm.
you know, us not being in alignment with the ORS doesn't nullify the library, right?
Mhm.
The library district itself is created under a completely different statute,
Mhm.
451, and your money stream is fine. I didn't do the research yet, but I'm not sure if we actually created our library under this particular statute or if we used our home rule powers, because there are differences. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
And so if we go back and we look at how the library was actually designed, and maybe you know, Chair Myron.
I was going to comment because the reason I went to the statutes was the very first sentence in chapter 220 of public libraries establishment
Mhm.
is the Canby Public Library is established for the purpose of maintaining a free public library in accordance with ORS 357.400 through 621.
So you pulled that out and I appreciate that because that saves me time.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if we establish under that,
Mhm.
then that does rule us, it's supreme to us.
Mhm.
So even our ordinance saying differently
Mhm.
doesn't nullify, because it doesn't overpower the state in that regard. So it is just what it is. We follow the ORS first in this case.
Okay.
Because
that's my big
when there's a
question.
conflict of laws, if if the state has specifically ordered something,
Mhm,
then
Mhm.
we have to follow that. The home rule doesn't allow us to get around it.
mhm.
If they leave open any sort of wiggle room, then our home rule says that we reserve all powers that the state can take from us. So if
Mhm.
that helps. So technically, you're still
Mhm.
just following the Oregon State statute. Now, whether or not you interpret the librarian to mean he can ask for somebody to be designated.
Mhm.
Now, it sounds like the process that you guys felt you had to follow was the board now has to choose somebody. And maybe it now goes back to Mr. Smith here to designate somebody if he can't be here to do it, or if one of you would still like to do it, if that answers that question. Now, the bigger question, it sounds like, is this something that you guys would have wanted to advise on? And it sounds like you would. And so I'm here to apologize that the process didn't include you to that.
Mhm.
My assumption when it came to me for review
Mhm.
was, oh, they're asking for these changes. And I sign off on, okay, did we correctly do our own ordinances?
Oh,
You see what I mean?
mhm.
Without thinking about, oh, maybe I should research libraries
Library,
in general.
okay,
So partially my not going
Mhm.
on a deep dive,
Mhm.
not necessarily having ever run into this before. So
Mhm.
that's exactly how the process happened.
Mhm.
Well, I guess the good and bad news is it's not like you're nullified. You are still existing under Oregon state statute. And technically, if we're out of alignment, you're just following the Oregon state statute in this regard.
So in translation to actual day-to-day operation in the past, and when I was second term of the board, so there's this 7-year working relationship. It was our library, our then director, sorry, I always think of librarians as librarians. Our then director had to step in and take minutes for, Lizzie was the one, Lizzie Figueroa, who's now circulation supervisor. Okay, so she was the one taking the minutes.
Yeah.
And doing it. And I can tell it takes a lot of chair time. And so in recruiting somebody, because what I have done in recruiting for the board now, this is I think my second round of recruiting members, is that who's willing to actually take an office, who's willing to be vice chair or chair, and now I would add to it, and secretary. Because it is a sizable job, and to have a smooth transition, because like I said, I've got 1 more year on the board and then I'm off unless council decides that they'd rather have me off the board sooner, which is their prerogative without cause. So I've always understood that. I do tend to go for, well, where did this come from? What's the practical application? And so now I understand why it was done, to bring us just into alignment with everybody else. And I've only been to a couple of other meetings, so I have no idea if other boards function like the library does, how many members they've got even to be, so who do they have to draw on for their officers and for the regular duties, so that when one chair steps down, because we had the thing and Susie wound up being chair because our chair left, just bam, like that. Okay, and we've had another member this year leave the same way. So to say it shakes things up and you've got to do something rather, you're operating short. And the way it's set up, Lois is scheduled to go off here June 30th unless she re-ups. So we'll be looking in just 2 months at another one. So I'm when I said long-term earlier on, I'm looking down the road. How do we have some cohesiveness in this board and service? Because history really matters. And I've got the longest history, and that isn't just because I've been in the city of Canby since 1971. Rick.
By way of your introduction, let me add my 2 cents. And
Absolutely.
beyond the legal advice, which certainly appreciate, there's really, and I've been on this one thing, I was on the Park and Rec board almost 20 years here recently. And I have a familiarity of how boards and committees work. Some are active, some are less active, some are single interest oriented. Some are like us, 2 are like us, which must have institutional knowledge. Volunteers come and go, we come and go.
Mhm.
Somebody gets sick, you're always scrambling, unfortunately, for volunteer
Mhm.
representatives for advisory boards. So that's what we're faced with. The only rock thing you have, hopefully, is a city administration that has some stability, has employees that stay a while, has institutional knowledge, records, legal records that support any liability claims against the city, as well as you're also representing the citizens are paying taxes
Mhm.
and they're supported. Park department, city residents pay taxes, library district, city and county, and non-district, and non-city people pay taxes.
Mhm.
There's a greater responsibility to have institutional knowledge with a paid library director or designee taking the minutes, doing the information every month or every 3 months or whatever the city requires for meeting, for advisory group to meet. So I'm going beyond the legal situation.
Mhm.
I'm talking about how can it work with stability, practicality, and just more cohesiveness,
Mhm. Mhm.
okay?
Mhm.
Can I,
And as far
can
as
I
other
say,
committees,
I agree.
and other subcommittees, sometimes are appointed for special interest, and I'm not gonna go through the names, but they're basically subcategories. The parks and the library are primary functions of this city. And we can't just let it slide with whoever we, cajole into being a secretary for a year from a citizen standpoint. It's got to be directed by an institutional person. Or, not directed, I should say,
Mhm.
monitored and have the legal minutes and therefore perpetuity. So we have something to refer to. And I hear it all the time. City council say, well, what's in the minutes? What's in the minutes? Who wrote the minutes? Well, there's no minutes for 3 years. Oh, there's no minutes. Why? Somebody dropped the ball. The way not to drop the ball is have a staff person be responsible for the ball.
Does anybody know why the state library board established that condition and why the city included it originally? I mean, the language in the original, I always have trouble kind of finding it. But it speaks to the director or designee taking the minutes, which is how we operated for all the years up until October, it was October that it was changed.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know the legislative history, but my assumption is you probably would want somebody to be responsible for a library that is beyond the just volunteers. Because then you have to at least have some sort of relationship with your city recorder to make sure that the record's kept and turned in and all and correct. But I'm not sure why. I mean, there are different boards and they do things differently under law. I guess I'm just here to report, it wasn't nefarious, I don't think. It was, they were changing what they thought you wanted. And then I think they just thought, oh, we'll change this piece of it. Not knowing that it ran afoul of what the state statute says. The state statute still governs, so it's like it never happened. Because we'll have to follow the statute more than we have to follow our own. So, but I guess the hope is that you guys don't feel disrespected. And so part of that is, right, that what I'm hearing too is that you would hope that there's a little more communication between my bosses and you guys.
Yeah.
And so I will gladly deliver that message as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It felt like a real kick in the, that we've been rolling along, doing the best we could under the same challenging Zoom COVID restrictions as everybody else. And it was just like, not a word, not a word. This is, yes.
So I would like to add to what Rick was saying, that I think, number one, if this is truly going to be an advisory board that represents the citizens of the library district, that it would be much easier to recruit people if a secretary was provided. That a lot of us is kind of like, I don't know how good my notes would be because I tend to go off on tangents and my notes would go off on tangents. And secondly, I'm not good at following Robert's Rules of Order. So having somebody who did that, who actually kept people in line, would be a very, very good thing. And Rick's point about continuity and the idea that the history of knowledge, I think, is incredibly important in a library, especially after, you know, the last 2 years of COVID and things like that. So I just wanted to say that I think that Rick was spot on saying that it would be, I think, beneficial to this board to have somebody who had that history of knowledge, that continuity to provide. And I think it would be much, much easier to recruit people to boards such as this, not just the library advisory board, but other city boards. If you really want community input, then having that would be, I think, a very positive thing.
And I think maybe some of the spirit of this, and this is me just thinking out loud because I don't know the legislative history, but you know, it's not the worst thing in the world. You still have the library director showing up to your meetings. And so in a sense, you're getting more than probably what part of that was created for. Oh, I believe we're going to have the Parks and Rec Board in here at 6:30.
6:30, right.
So we are at about 12 after 6.
Yeah, but I mean, I think some of the spirit of that is the interplay between staff and the board. And so at least that's not broken, right? You have
Yes.
the highest level of the staff for your department here, which is kind of cool. So.
And that was the history.
Yeah.
Our director, and that was why when she stepped in, she had been there for all those meetings, so she knew Lizzie's style, I guess you could say, and when to clarify, which is something I'm not always good at. So, and Denise, yes.
All of this comes on the tail end of the changes that the library board has had to adjust to with the new city manager and the new director at the same time, because everything we were focused on completely flipped.
Yeah.
We no longer had the same agenda, and we were trying to adjust everyone in the library board was affected by this complete upheaval along with COVID. And then thinking we were coming out of COVID and things, we were trying to realign and make sure that the library had certain needs, and we wanted to align ourselves with what Danny needed too. And then this comes out with thinking that just the avenue of communication being completely broken. It was as if we were out in left field and the door was closed. So we're feeling like we're on an island still. And I can tell you, I don't think our focus is very clear yet because we're not connected. And without that connection, we don't feel that we're doing anything to make the library connect better for the people. So Yeah.
An example is we're coming up on budgets.
Mhm.
And in the past, we were privileged to have monthly reports. So you had, especially for those of us who aren't so much numerical people, but are more words, it really helped to see that picture every month change and to be able to ask the questions right then at that meeting, which we did. We grilled the director. There were no bashful board members. And it developed in, the trust relationship got there. Board members dropped in on the director. And of course, COVID just, that was over. And so anything that can be done as hopefully this whole COVID thing is easing to grow a more fluent working relationship with all the staff, because we serve the IGA-controlled Clackamas County Library District. So there are those obligations on top of things and the restrictions and the politics. There are challenges that I don't know if we're all aware of all the time, because my understanding is that one of the reasons was to lift all the libraries up and help those who were struggling, which Canby definitely was. Several were, as a matter of fact, at that time. But so how now to feed in and work with all the changes, because all those members have pretty much changed also, an awful lot of the participants. So it is a whole new group of people addressing some of the same challenges. Some of them have history and know what's began the district and moved it forward and supported it. And some don't have any of that. So to me, and I've worked for newspapers and I've published and I've done all that kinds of stuff in different boards I served on. It was about communication. So hopefully with going to in person, we will be able to have more direct communication. And I want to say for the record, Lois, I'm grateful because I really want to add sitting down and plowing through that in a group. And I'm happy to leave that to our city attorney. One, because you're more familiar with the language and what applies and what doesn't. And, I think we're all just doing the best we can. And so I think our city administrator went out the door for a minute. So we don't need a public work session to discuss code. That's what it sounds like to me. Is everybody?
There was a motion made, but there was no vote.
I apologize. See, like I said, that's my thing. I'm used to consensus groups. And so, okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Huh?
It appeared as you had your hand up earlier for a second too, and I don't know.
I was
You felt
just,
heard.
it's just anecdotal. I've 20 years on the Parks Board. We never had issues like this. Never. 20 years straight. We had a city staff person there, designee, director, didn't care about the title. It's irrelevant. Someone responsible. So the board could participate, the advisory board, all of them equally could participate. Number one, that's another side benefit. You have a volunteer
Oh, yeah.
taking notes, they can't
Yeah.
participate, they can't do two jobs. And then they shouldn't even have that job. Like I said, referring to institutional knowledge. So you don't have, and you don't have, it's apples and oranges. If you do the thing, oh, let's do everything this way. Well, I get the feedback that says, well, let's take some stuff away from them. They're too busy doing other things. Let's not have these liaison things going on. I think it should, the liaison thing should be the reverse. Our chair makes one meeting, one council meeting a year. And the city of the, councilor goes to 11.
Mhm.
Totally reversed, just flip it.
Yep.
But then going back to what we're talking about, I mostly agree with what the proposal or the motion,
Mhm.
but I want to leave the door open. We see
Mhm.
something that we don't like, and it's not fair to the general public or us or the city themselves. We should have the opportunity to bring it up, have an advisory vote on a motion for that particular paragraph. We're going to propose that that particular item in that code is ancient history, or it was put in inadvertently. We have an obligation to challenge things like that. Or else we're just lapdogs. If the council wants us to be lapdogs, find lapdog people.
Well, and I'll say this, I don't think, again, I think this would be a one-off in terms of changing the ordinance that pertains to the library.
And I have one more thing. Okay, so
Yeah.
when we spoke about things coming late, and I mentioned that Maya had sent out as the city deputy recorder, the library board, and it is about voting members, so it's updating, yes, that our full-time student is a full-time voting member.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. And we had talked about that, and our liaison had given us updates on it and when it was going to be voted on. And that's part of why this other thing was like, what? Okay, so here's another thing on that, apparently the same meeting in October. And that is that, yes, the code was updated to consist of 8 voting members, and the one would be a high school student. And staying on through graduation, obviously, if you desire. This is, we're not going to coerce you into giving 4 years.
I'm good for now.
Okay, you're good. That's all that matters is now, okay? Oh, right, yes. Okay, and then it talks about how many live in the unincorporated area and how many live outside. And the language had been, and I was operating under this language, 2 of the 8 voting members must reside outside the Canby city limits, which I understand is in the IGA. So, okay. And then it said originally, the other 5 must, of course, yeah, okay. The other 5 shall be residents of the city. Okay, so we just skinned under with that, because what I didn't know on the people that were recruited that I didn't do is that one or 2. Anyway, I'm still unclear on outside of the city, gone for 6 months of the year out of the state. So, okay, that part I found out after I became chair the second time. So here's the thing. I would have liked to discuss whether is it law that says, in other words, is there a stricture, is it absolute written in granite that this really huge majority has to live in the city? Or can we recruit from that service area that we actually serve? 1 more or 2 more even. If we've got 2, see, like right now, we've got someone who's applying from the unincorporated area.
And are you asking,
Legally.
well, okay, but are you asking so that you can advise the council to potentially change that?
Well, if I'd known this was going to be discussed in the council the time that it apparently was, I
Yeah.
probably would have made an effort to be there and say, hey, we have qualified people out in that area that Canby actually serves, and they don't have any voice. And so I've always been, I want people to have a voice. Number one, if they understand, because when I was on LDAC, one of the big things was, okay, our rate for the library district is so low, it's not working. And we're going to go to the voters and request more tax money. If people feel they have no representation and no way to voice, they're less inclined to say, yeah, let's do that.
Well, I could say this. So,
Okay.
I think there has been some potential over the time, just slow incremental changes in other boards. Other boards have gone up in membership and down in membership, depending on how popular that board was for like a season or, you know, a year or whatever. But just looking straight at the 357, 465, it says 5 members or shall consist of not less than 5 members. And I'm wondering if in the origins of this, they didn't think maybe those 5 members have to be from the city itself because it's a city board,
Right.
but that then the IGA requests that 2 members are
Yep,
outside. So
yep.
then they went with 7, making 5 have to be in the city. That would be my best guess. If you wanted to add more members, then those can kind of be, you know, altered a little bit, I would assume. So if you have a 5 minimum that probably has to be from the city, if you had a 9-member board, 2 could at least be out and you could have up to 7 in. Does that make sense? Or vice versa, you could have 5 in and 4 in the outer reaches. But it's still ultimately, in whatever advice you have, knowing now what those parameters are, you would then take that to the council if you wanted it changed and they could change it. I will say this, if we're going to be changing back the secretary thing, maybe that's a moment to, if you have some advice in terms of how it looks, that would be a perfect time and maybe that would mend some fences. Maybe that would make you feel hurt, right?
So Kathleen.
Yeah, and I'm looking at
I'm
the,
sorry.
vote.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the clock that we need to vote. Was yours an amendment to the?
Just discussion item. You and I spent some time on it. 3 of us spent some time on this entire city ordinance. And it's a lot of editing we did on here, potential editing, recommended editing. Some of it's really innocuous, some of it is important. But it needed some housekeeping on this. And I would appreciate that we're halfway through it on 3 of us, or 2.5 of us, I guess, depending on what Lois thinks her position is on it. But we got into it. I think we should, if we're going to bring up the secretary position situation so we can move forward, we should add whatever we think is pertinent to this ordinance, run it by as an advisory or discuss it and vote on some kind of subcommittee report here. If it goes down, it goes down. If it goes up, move it forward. Move it forward for Joe and the city administrator to consider it or present it to the council, whatever the process is.
Usually we're hoping that the liaisons have good relationships with the board.
Okay.
And that those liaisons bring what the board is asking forward. And that is how at least half of this happened, which was at least the voting member from the high school student, right? So I think let's continue on with that process. And you guys, I guess, I don't know if the spirit of the motion is, we don't really need a subcommittee. You guys were always free to bring stuff to your own board. You can discuss it as a board. And then advise, either the liaison to bring it forward. You can always send it my way and I can try to, read it and give some feedback. So, I mean, we're not trying to be tricky or have a very limited way in which, we operate and you guys operate. My preference is to be open to, if you reach out to me, I will get back. If you go through your liaison, I think that's the council's preferred way, so that the liaison actually does what they're supposed to do.
Okay, and we are basically maybe 30 seconds from being out of time here.
I believe they went up to.
Oh, I did. I saw them go up. And so, because if we break this off in the middle, when we haven't reached.
So I was not saying I object to policy of,
discussing things, saying, yeah, things can always be made better. What I saw was legal interpretations, and that to me was flashing red lights. It's like, no, we are not getting into legal interpretations. We are not attorneys. Except for you, we're not attorneys.
no.
And that to me, just in my professional career, that's just a no-no. And so improvements, yes. Legal interpretations, coming back to Joe with our own legal interpretation is just plain foolishness in my book. And that's what, everything I was hearing to me sounded like a legal interpretation. And I don't want to go there. I don't think it's within our power and duties to go there. There's always room for policy improvement. And I do think that having Joe here today gave us some great ideas for things that we can make a suggestion, but understanding how to do it in the correct manner is very important. So I do appreciate all the advice and input you gave us today.
Thank you.
So,
Well, thanks for having me.
so I will revise my motion is that we continue with looking at process improvements, policy improvements, but we are careful not to get into legal interpretations. That's just what's so important to me. So
I'll second that.
All in
If it can be
favor?
reported easily.
I
Okay, we got a unanimous vote. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Yeah, and I just want to say thank you to Danny because it looked like you carried this through and it was,
Oh, I was going to report. Sorry,
Yes.
waiting my turn.
I'm, thank you for your patience.
I sent out a copy. I did not reprint the whole policy manual. And I would rather not serve those resources, but I printed you the page, the city manager
Yes.
approved
This is,
So,
okay, thank you.
No changes,
Priceless.
city manager?
no. So I had to update that manual format.
Okay.
When do you think that'll be official for the public to be in the?
I mean, it was effective when Scott approved it.
Okay,
So
so-
we have updated it. The staff have been
So the
notified.
public can have access to that.
Yes. If there's a challenge tomorrow, the process will be followed.
Thank
So
you.
that
Okay,
is.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was intended to make things a little simpler.
Yeah.
And
first
more
win.
clear. Yeah. And that's basically what it got in mind with the rest of this stuff.
They're not all
No,
wins. They're not, there's wins and losses.
Yeah. All right. So, no, back to
30
the
seconds.
agenda that I just really blew through here.
What happened to our group?
We took care of that one. Let's see, turn questions, did that one. So Chris's is the only one, and I don't know if anybody else had the same feelings as I did, but it sounded like, and I don't think we need a motion. I think when he comes again, it'll be in the minutes that we don't think that this approach is the one to go with. Yeah. All right.
Consensus?
So, and
We gotta
let's
vote
see.
on it? We don't have to vote on everything, do we?
No, we don't have to vote on it. No motion, so we're, yeah. I did ask for the board members to provide their updated contact information. I've gotten Luke's was the first one, and then Jessica. So if anybody else has changes that I don't know about, just get back to me on it. And the final thing is from Maya, the expiration dates, because I was getting a little antsy about knowing and not knowing when. There is a slight dispute on Lois's, but anyway, so regarding that, I will just ask Lois to
have to reapply.
you can reapply and yeah, just, get the form from, I guess, Maya now.
Yes, you do.
I'll tell you what, you want to come to this next interview? No, well, which isn't even set up yet. Excellent. Thank you so very much. Okay, does anybody else have any concerns or thoughts? I want to thank everybody.
I just had one thing to share. if I may.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So in reviewing the upcoming LDAC report card from Canby Public Library, one of the requirements, this is my interpretation, is that there's a request in the report that each city or county advisory board review OAR as it applies to the IGA. So from my perspective, that is a defined role that the boards, it's at their discretion if they do it annually or every other year. But that is the reporting requirement that LDAC has asked the boards to be part of. But that's just looking at minimum standards for libraries. That's
Right.
not looking at ORS or your municipal code even. It's looking at the minimum requirements that the state provides as guidelines and how they map to the IGA. So that's the piece. I'm not saying like what you said earlier, Rick, that you can't look at those other pieces, obviously, but that's the required part that they're asking all of the cities to at least be aware of. So that's the only clarifying piece that I just noticed in the last few months when I've been working on that. So I just wanted to give you guys, that's the connection for me to where we're kind of our North Star is.
Okay, and you will be sharing information with us. What I found in going through those was that I had questions about a few of them. Some of them I could answer on my own and others not. And I made a note, ask staff on these things. So if everybody wants to go to those OARs, no, ORAs, Oregon Revised.
It's OAR.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
oars like a boat.
It went in the original minutes wrong, and it, for some reason, it's glitched my brain on the wrong one. Anyway, our board in the past did that annual review.
We did.
Because when Canby was really active on changing that form, because the first one was.
So
That was
my recommendation as a staff and the director is that that is what we look at routinely. But that would be one meeting a year where we look at that and see how are we aligning.
Yep.
And it's a little more kind of housekeeping that we keep up with, so.
And what I don't recall is what is the final date? In other words, when do we need to schedule it as part of our board discussion? Because I do think, I think we took 2 weeks, 2 months.
It
last
did.
time.
It was, that's
go through that
exactly what
thing.
my question was. When is this due? Because it took us weeks.
This is last year, so we missed the boat. So we'll be looking at that for upcoming year.
Okay.
Well, that is always-
Good to have, we should actually have a schedule as a board
Yes.
for these things need to happen
Right.
at this time, so that,
Yeah.
and everybody is in agreement and you know it's coming.
Yes.
And there isn't any, we have to do that now. So I would really like to see a lot of the things on our list of powers and duties be a much more scheduled and organized so that we actually know what we're doing and when we're doing it.
I think the nice thing is that when we did it last time, it was right before the change of the directors. We had combed through so clearly through every single paragraph, every sentence, and every item in there that it should be an easier job this
I
time.
would think,
Yeah.
it should.
So
That was
it's my
certainly-
granddaughter's birthday and we have a FaceTime meeting coming up really soon.
So would someone like to make a motion, and will officially, which I can't do. to
I make
close
a
the meeting?
motion to close the meeting.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're closing at 6:40. So, and yet one of the challenges is that we used to have that extra 15 minutes when we were in the little room. I only used it twice, but